You just realized that you needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other job sites. Indeed sponsored jobs help you stand out and hire fast. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so you can reach the people that you want faster. And it makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Plus, with Indeed sponsored jobs, there's no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts, and you only pay for results. How fast is Indeed? Well, in the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/BWN. Just go to Indeed.com/BWN right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/BWN. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
What's up, y'all? It's Drewski, and I've teamed up with Mountain Dew to produce a hilarious new basketball podcast called The Dew Zone with Drewski. Learn the backstories of your favorite ballers and celebrities like Jamal Murray.
Did you have like a favorite team? Was it the Raptors at the time or no? Was the Raptors even started around that time?
Come on, bro. I ain't that old, fam. You talking like I was 50.
Taylor Rooks, Asia Wilson, and many more. You won't want to miss this. Listen to The Dew Zone with Drewski on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts.
What up, listener? We wanted to take a second to thank you for listening to this Blue Wire podcast. Be sure to show your support to this pod by subscribing and dropping a 5-star review on iTunes, a follow on Spotify, or the appropriate DAP for any other platform you might be listening on. And if you're enjoying this show, chances are you'll like one of our 75 other sports podcasts. Find more shows you'll love at BlueWirePods.com. Thanks again for listening, and now back to your regularly scheduled podcast.
The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast.
Frank Jackson operating. Kennard, the pop out for three. Got it! 6.6 remaining. 30 second half points for Luke Kennard.
I mean, he's just been on fire this whole afternoon and caught in rhythm.
Welcome to the Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast. I am coming to you by myself in this intro to let you know that this is a pre-trade deadline podcast where we talk about Luke Kennard with Lazarus Jackson, who writes for Detroit Bad Boys blog. He's like the Dave King of the Detroit Pistons. He also hosts Detroit versus Everybody, which is a Detroit Pistons podcast on the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I also joined him on his podcast. This is running on both of our feeds. We're going to talk about Elie Okobo, Javon Carter, the Phoenix Suns first-round pick, and of course, Luke Kennard. Luke Kennard is the potential trade target of the Phoenix Suns, according to Woj. We get into everything about Luke, so this is a must-listen if you're interested in Luke Kennard. Of course, we'll be back after the trade deadline if anything happens. I'll be joined again at that point by Sam. This is a really great conversation between me and Lazarus. Take a listen. Let us know what you think.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pistons versus Everybody, the Detroit Pistons podcast on the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I am your host, Lazarus Jackson, and today I'm being joined by Mike Vigil of the Timeline Podcast, the Phoenix Suns podcast on the Blue Wire Podcast Network. What's up, Mike?
How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming on. And the reason I got you on is because apparently our teams are thinking about making a trade with one another.
Apparently.
We got the Woj thunderclap at like 12:45 a.m. East Coast time this morning. And, you know, we were talking about this a little bit in the pre-show about how, like, you know, neither one of our teams is really, like, known for doing a bunch of midseason trades.
Yeah.
And so it was a little surprising. So the framework of the trade we got from Woj was Javon Carter, Elie Okobo, and a first-round pick. No protections mentioned. Interesting for Luke Kennard, but that's not the entirety of the trade. We're just going to limit our discussion to that framework. So, Mike, what can you tell me about Elie Okobo?
Elie Okobo is interesting. So the Suns drafted him late last season, at the beginning of last season. So he's in the middle of his second season. I didn't expect him to play much this year, but he's getting quite a bit of run because the Suns bench is so weak. And I think that's why these Kennard rumors are out right now. They're trying to find some sort of scoring off the bench. He's a French point guard, didn't go to college. He played in Europe, and now he's in the NBA. He's a project. Like, for example, he did not make the French national team. He was cut for Frank Ntilikina. And if you kind of think about how many NBA players can you even think of in the NBA that are French? There's not a lot of them right now. So there's not a lot of high-level French NBA players, and he did not even make that French national team. So it kind of gives you an idea of the kind of player he is. I still think there's a lot of potential with Elie Okobo. He's an okay shooter. He can shoot off the catch. Not the greatest off the dribble from long range. He can penetrate. It gets a little harder to finish when he's underneath the basket. He can kick it out a little bit. He's a little out of control, I think, in a lot of cases when driving towards the basket. But I think a lot of Suns fans, and of course the general management that actually drafted Elie Okobo, who was the previous general manager, Ryan McDonough, kind of look at him as like a long-term project that you can try and develop. Of course, everyone thinks of Tony Parker when you think of a small French point guard.
Right,
and I think that's kind of how they view him. Maybe they could develop him the way that Tony Parker developed over time, another second-round draft pick that developed later in his career to be a really good player. He doesn't. I don't think he has that kind of potential in him. We've seen what he's done so far, and it's not super, super impressive. But I think there is potential for him to be an NBA player. I don't think he's the type of player where you look at him and say he's going to be out of the league in a few years. I think he does have a role potentially off the bench on a team, running that backup unit.
So the first time he really entered the rotation was due to the Rubio injury, right?
Right.
So was the plan for him to not play much of all this season anyway? And he kind of inserted his way back into the rotation thanks to the Rubio injury. Rubio's back and he's still playing, but his minutes have been a little bit more inconsistent. And so I'm wondering what's the coaching staff's level of confidence in the way he's been playing so far this year?
That is a great question, specifically because the backup point guard position for the Suns has been all over the place. So the Suns drafted Ty Jerome this season. A lot of people look at Ty Jerome as a potential backup point guard of the future. They also have Javon Carter. Tyler Johnson comes off the bench for this team, kind of a combo guard, has some point guard skills. And then there's Elie Okobo. Even after that, the Suns signed an undrafted player named Jalen LeCue, who is essentially out of high school. He never played in college. He had 5 years in high school due to a school change that allowed him to be drafted directly out of high school. He declared for the draft, went undrafted, and the Suns have him on their G League team right now, and it looks like they have plans to develop him long-term because they signed him to a 4-year deal, which is rare for undrafted players. So there are a lot of guards, backup point guards, available for this team. The weird thing about them is none of them have really played consistently enough to really take hold of that backup point guard spot. So from game to game, you'll see those minutes fluctuate pretty drastically. And the main reason is Devin Booker obviously becoming an offensive superstar this year. When he's off the court, there's just not a lot of offense for this team. DeAndre Ayton, for all he can do, he doesn't carry an offense on his own just because centers don't really do that in the NBA anymore. That means that they need some sort of guard production, and they're really not getting it from anyone. So Elie Okobo has found his way into the lineup more than I expected earlier in the season. I expected Tyler Johnson to play like he has in the past. He's not. He's been pretty bad this year. In basically all lineups where Tyler Johnson plays, the net negative is bad. It's all bad numbers. So he's just fallen out of the rotation. Every once in a while he gets spot minutes, but there are series of games where he doesn't play at all. And Elie Okobo tends to be the guy that takes those minutes, along with Javon Carter. Actually, kind of interestingly, those are the two guys that have played probably the most in those backup positions, because Ty Jerome was injured for a while, and he's a rookie, so you can't get much out of him.
Right.
So Elie Okobo, to be honest, it sounds like I'm not super high on him, but I think he's actually performed better than I expected him to this season. I expected that to be a long-term project where you just sort of put him in situations where you're either up by a lot or down by a lot, garbage time, and develop him like that over time. But he's actually performed a little bit better than I expected. They still need to upgrade that backup guard spot drastically, but he's been better than I expected.
Yeah, I did notice that even if this trade went through as completed, 2 point guards for a shooting guard, the Suns did have 3 more point guards on the roster. It was like, oh, okay, that's notable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Javon Carter has also kind of inserted his way into the rotation, but it doesn't really sound like he's playing point guard. It sounds like he's more playing the role of we envisioned him playing coming out of college, of defensive stopper, and not necessarily ball handler, but guy who guards the other guy's best guard. Do I got that right?
I'm guessing that most of the people listening to this podcast have no idea who Javon Carter is. Would that be an accurate guess, do you think?
It might be accurate, yeah.
Okay. So Javon Carter, he played in West Virginia. He was a Mountaineer. He's one of the most beloved players to ever come out of that program. People who went to West Virginia, they still, to this day, love him. And you can tell that if you ever tweet about him, because they'll like that tweet, they'll retweet it, they'll claim him as their own immediately. And Javon Carter, he does sometimes play point guard. Now, the Suns do, of course, have Devin Booker and Ricky Rubio to play next to him. So Devin Booker, even though he's a shooting guard, has a lot of point guard skills. So even when he's playing next to Devin Booker, it's kind of a shared role. The problem with Javon is he can become a little indecisive with the ball at the top of the key, and he's not great at penetrating. He can't really get into the paint with his own live dribble. So his main thing, the reason he's so beloved in West Virginia lore, is because he's a defensive player. He loves to get under guys' skin. He's very small, and he gets right up underneath guys, and he kind of shadows them. He'll trace them all 90 feet of the court. He can get steals because he's quick, and he's right underneath them, basically. He can really dodge screens really well. But that's kind of it. Actually, to be honest, his shooting is much better than advertised as well. He's done okay shooting on catch and shoot 3-pointers.
Yeah,
I actually
it's
think he
only
should shoot
catch
more.
and shoot stuff, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, he'll isolate on a big man late in the shot clock, and he's done actually better than I expected at that as well. But that's more of a function of my expectations of what he was capable of than I think saying that, it's a skill that he has. I just expected none of that at all from him. And I think, as you can hear, these are why the Suns are looking for backup guard production, because what I described were two very flawed players who are young and could potentially get better. If the Suns were a little more patient, I think they would be willing to put the time into either one of those guys or both of them to try and develop them into a better NBA player. But because the bench units are so bad, once Devin Booker leaves the court, that's why they're packaging these two guys together to try and find and upgrade someone who can be instant offense off the bench and be more productive, especially when you have a guy like Ricky Rubio. Ricky Rubio, for all he does well, and he does a lot well. He's good on offense. He's good on defense, but he's not a scorer. He's just not. You have to have another scorer at the guard position next to him to maximize his capabilities. And if it's not Devin Booker, because it can't be for every single minute that Ricky Rubio's on the floor, you're not maximizing Ricky Rubio either. So that's really why they're kind of looking for someone to upgrade those two guys. We're now going to take a quick break to tell you about a brand new sponsor, Bet Online. Missed your chance to bet on the Chiefs and Niners? Fear not. Blue Wire is excited to partner with Bet Online to help you win big no matter the time of year. With March Madness, the Masters, and Major League Opening Day right around the corner, BetOnline has you covered for all your latest news, scores, and odds. It's the best way to place your bets, and it's free to sign up. Plus, it's never too early to lay down your future bet for Super Bowl 2021. Head over to betonline.ag and use our promo code BLUEWIRE to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. We signed up. It's super easy. And if you're already making wagers, it's a fantastic way to support this podcast. Again, that's promo code BLUEWIRE, all one word, when you sign up at betonline.ag. Bring your best bets home with BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts.
Okay, no, and that kind of brings me to something I did want to talk to you about, which is like what Luke Kennard's role would be on this team. Last year we had the like full on display of like Devin Booker point book.
Mm-hmm.
So like would Luke be a complement to Booker in like two shooting guard lineups? There's been a lot of thought in Pistons fandom that Luke Kennard could play a little point guard. So if you just have two combo-ish guards in the backcourt at the same time, that's something that could be effective. But the Woj report mentioned that the Suns kind of envisioned him in a high minute role, but still coming off the bench. So I guess what in Ricky Rubio, they just signed Ricky Rubio to that 3-year deal for not insignificant money.
Right.
And it sounds like you're saying that the Suns are having real trouble scoring when Devin Booker sits.
Mm-hmm.
So how valuable do you see Luke Kennard being in like a 30-minute a night bench role for the Suns?
Very, 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 very valuable for a few reasons. One, if you take Tyler Johnson out of the rotation entirely, which he kind of did himself, there is no backup shooting guard on this team. We just talked about all of the backup guards on this team.
Well, Cam Johnson is like functionally a shooting guard, right?
He is, but he's 6'9", so he tends to play the forward role. Right now he is injured, and that's part of the trouble with the offense for the Suns. There's not a lot of clarity on his injury and how long he's going to be out. I would imagine it wouldn't stretch longer than the All-Star break, but it's really hard to predict. The Suns aren't exactly super transparent with injury news, so it's hard to predict that. But really, Cam Johnson has played 2, 3, and 4 on this team. And I think when you draft a 6'9" shooter, if you don't have the idea of him playing power forward at some point in his career, what's the point? I think a little bit. You kind of need him to be able to play power forward at some point. So if you take Tyler Johnson out of it, then it's just Javon Carter, Elie Okobo, even Jalen LeCue, if you want to count him. He's been called up from the G League for the past few games because the Suns are struggling with a lot of injuries right now. Those are not really shooting guards. So I think he would be massive for the team. I think he would be like a featured offensive player. And I actually think if you think about it, Cam Johnson and Luke Kennard playing next to each other, that becomes kind of interesting coming off the bench. That's a lot more shooting than this team has had in the past. And that's the other problem. This team has 2 stars that you could potentially build a good offensive out of if you think about Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton. But the open 3-point shots surrounding those guys are just not going in right now. Dario Saric, for all he can be good at, he's not quite hitting threes like he needs to be in order for this team to be like an offensive machine. Ricky Rubio, not quite a 3-point shooter, as we all know. And those are the 2 main guys. And the other guy is Kelly Oubre, and he's inconsistent when it comes to that 3-point shooting. That's the starting lineup. So if you think about a guy like Luke Kennard, I think that if you're willing to give up that first-round pick for Luke Kennard, you have to play him with Devin Booker at some point. And do you think, actually, this would be a good question for you. Luke Kennard, his passing has gotten a lot better this year in the minimum amount of time that we've seen him play. He appears to be a pretty good passer. He's averaging a career high in assists at 4, a little over 4 assists per game. Obviously, as you said, some Pistons fans view him as somebody who has point guard skills. Can he play the one position? And outside of that, do you think he could play 3? Do you think he could be a small forward in certain lineups? He's 6'5", so he's not massive, obviously, but do you think that's something that he has potential to do?
That is something he did last year, And so, like, absolutely, yes, he can slide up to 3, but I would say that's not really maximizing his potential, especially when you have, for the Suns, a guy like a Mikal Bridges on the roster. Like, you would rather have that guy playing the 3, or like a Oubre playing the 3 next to Kennard, instead of trying like a 3-guard lineup with Kennard, Booker, and another guy. As far as like, I do think a like Booker Kennard backcourt could work offensively. Those are both two guys who operate well with the ball in their hands. Like that's one thing I think that doesn't get enough play around the league with Luke, is that like he's not just a spot up shooter. He's a really effective pick and roll ball handler. You mentioned the passing. The passing has been a great element. The thing he's really missing is the ability to get like all the way to the rim and finish. But he's such a lethal mid-range shooter that he's still able to kind of create space and create separation. And he's done a lot. He's done a better job this year of like leaning on step backs and stuff to create separation and get all the way back to hit some threes. So yeah, I do think a Booker Kennard backcourt could work on offense. On defense is when like the trouble comes. Luke's not a terrible defender. He's not a great. He's a pretty good team defender, or he has been a pretty good team defender in the past. But like as an on-ball guy, he just doesn't have the length or like the lateral athleticism to really match with most other teams, like starting point guards or starting shooting guards. You know, that's part of the reason why he honestly like wasn't starting for the most part in Detroit until injuries kind of forced Casey's hand. And so, and you know, Booker has also had his struggles defensively. That's always kind of been the knock on him, from what I can tell. And so, I do wonder like if that's going to be your quote unquote like backcourt of the future, like the issues you're going to have defensively with that. Perhaps they get covered a little bit by Ayton's progress in that area. But
and Mikal Bridges is obviously
and
he's
Mikal
the
Bridges.
glue. He makes up for everyone's mistakes.
Is he more of a team defender, like a Robert Covington, or is he more of like an on-ball defender type of guy?
So that's the great thing about Mikal Bridges. He has the length and the speed to do both. He struggles a little bit with larger power, because he's been playing power forward a lot more than the past. Yeah, and he's skinny, but the length is what allows him to be able to do it. So there are times if someone's killing us, like for example, when the Suns play the Mavs, Mikal Bridges starts guarding Luka Doncic, but if they play another team that doesn't have like an obvious forward star, maybe like the Trailblazers, he might start somewhere off ball and be more of a roaming kind of guy trying to pick off on passes and stuff like that. And then towards the end of the game, switch him out onto Damian or CJ, whoever's killing us. That's kind of his skills there. He can do both. So it really just depends on the matchup and the situation. And the nice thing about him being such a Swiss Army knife is you can kind of switch him around like that. But I am glad that you brought that up, just with the idea of playing Booker and Kennard next to each other, because that was my first thought. If you're willing to give up your first round pick, which let's just say that James Jones, since he became the general manager for the Suns, he seems to be willing to give up picks. Let's say that. He gave up a pick to get rid of TJ Warren. It was a second round pick. He gave up DeAnthony Melton to get rid of Josh Jackson. And that's an example of the way that he uses assets to improve the team. And if you give up a pick, which it seems that they're willing to do to get Kennard, he has to be able to play next to Devin Booker at some point, because that's a first round pick. And if your first round pick is not able to play with your best player, that becomes a problem. I actually think that Devin Booker still can do what we call point book, those point guard, not starting the game, but throughout the game in specific situations. I actually think that does benefit him. But Monty Williams has done it very little. When all three wings in Cam Johnson, Kelly Oubre, and Mikal Bridges were healthy, there were lineups with Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, and all three of those wings playing next to each other, where Cameron Johnson essentially played a shooting guard like you described. And that was like all we've seen right before Cam Johnson was injured. So very few minutes of that. So I think if the Suns traded for Kennard, I think that might be an indication that they would be more willing to do point guard Devin Booker more often. And I actually would hope for that, because I actually don't mind those minutes. I think there are situations, Ricky Rubio when he's off the court, where you need to just surround Devin Booker with as much shooting as possible and try and just blitz teams offensively, because maybe you won't have the best defense in those minutes, but surviving those minutes as much as possible is kind of what the Suns need to do at this point.
No, yeah, I understand that. So the Suns are 20-30 right now. Their unprotected first round pick would be I think it's in the 11th spot right now. How much do you think you talked a little bit about James Johnson and valuing draft picks in order to make the team better. Woj didn't mention any protections. We've kind of like tiptoed around that.
Yeah.
Do you think the front office is going to put a protection on that first round pick, or are they just going to kind of expect that Kennard will make them good enough to not be worth it?
Do I think that they will? No, I think that there's a good chance that you'll get an unprotected pick for Luke Kennard. I'll be 100% honest with you there. Do I want them to? Yeah, I think that I do, because here's the thing. The lottery odds are flattened. We all know this. The Suns suffered from this pretty dramatically last season when they went from what it should have been the 3rd pick to the 6th pick, and then traded it for the 11th pick, ironically. So there's a chance that pick could be a lot higher than 11 based on the odds that are out there. The lottery is just a little more even. Your ability to jump spots is larger than it's ever been before. So do I want a protection? Yes, and I think the protection... Look, I'm not a draft guy. I really get into the draft late, like a lot of people who are into just the NBA. I don't really like watching college ball, but a lot of people have described this draft as a very bad draft. That's what a lot of people have said. And I think their calculus on that is, if this is going to be a bad draft and there's a chance that the Suns will not get a great player anyway, or at least a player that won't contribute right away, that's enough to make this trade. And here's the real reason why, and it's not a fun reason for a lot of Suns fans to hear. The Suns' number one priority is, and likely should be, keeping Devin Booker happy, because players have more control than ever before. And the Suns are not... He's the one star. Like, as much as we want DeAndre Ayton to be a star, it's not happening yet. Maybe it'll happen in the future. It's not happening yet. In order to keep their star happy, that means that they're going to try to get players that win now. I think that's the reason that they drafted Cameron Johnson. I actually think that's the reason they traded to get Ty Jerome as well, who has not yet contributed, but he's 21 when he was drafted, and he won a championship in his college career. He's a guy that's capable of producing early, hopefully. So I think they've shown a willingness to try and sort of sacrifice assets for what they would be traditionally valued as, for players that can contribute right now. And that means that if push came to shove, I think that Detroit has the advantage on that one. Let's just say that.
No, that's totally fair.
Yeah, I don't like it though. At least top 3. Because it's not the deepest draft.
If the pick rises, right? If you hit the top 4, you'd still want.
Exactly. So if you can try to protect it, I think that would be the smartest thing to do. But, I do want to ask you, though, why do you think Luke Kennard is even being shopped right now?
So that is a fun question. Luke has been out for the last 7-8 weeks now, since late December. So yeah, like 7-ish weeks with knee tendonitis. There is some concern that Luke is going to be very highly sought after in restricted free agency in the coming months. Mm-hmm. He's extension eligible this offseason, and restricted free agency the year after this one. The Pistons are looking to start a rebuild, and the appearance is that it looks like they don't want to start that rebuild paying Luke Kennard $15 million a year to be their starting shooting guard. The other thing is that Luke has clashed with the coaching staff. There was a very infamous blow up he had in Sacramento last season. There's some thought that he has been there's some thought that he's ready to play, and he's just not playing right now. And so there's a little concern about that.
Is that for trade reasons? Is that why you think that they're holding him out? If that were to be true,
I don't think it was initially for trade reasons. I think it was initially like not like a protest thing. His role has like fluctuated between the starting and the bench, and he's been like very effective in the bench role. But as a guy who wants to get paid, wants that extension, it behooves him to be in a starting role. But the coaching staff like disagrees, and so like I could see that being a source of frustration for him. Like, do I think like Luke is like a problem in the locker room? Like, no, I don't think that. But it does seem like they found another guy who does a lot of what Luke offers in Svi Mikhailuk. Like they're not the same player, but they do very similar things. And Svi has actually been better defensively. And so I can see in my head like where the front office has envisioned Luke to be like relatively expendable, or not necessarily like expendable, but like not extremely pertinent to a rebuild like over the next 3 years, right?
So that's like, from the team's perspective, and I do kind of get that, I guess. Although you have cap space even when you're rebuilding, as the Suns fans learned, you got to fill it up somehow at some point, especially if you start selling off every asset you have. How do you feel about Luke Kennard being on the trade block, though? Do you think that's good for the future of the Pistons? Do you think it's insane? Or I don't know. It's just, I was a little surprised that he was even an option. Of course, we've been searching the entire league for potential trade options, and that was a name that never even came across what I thought would be an option.
Yeah, it's not like a complete surprise, again, because like he'd been out and we'd started to hear rumblings like late last week. So it's not a complete shock, but it is kind of an adjustment. We did kind of think like, if the team was going to rebuild, the rebuilt team would be around like him and Sekou Doumbouya. Now, if he's traded and they pick up another top 12 pick in the draft, like now we can see the rebuild will be around like those three guys. You keep your own pick, you get the Phoenix pick, and the guy you drafted last year.
Right.
And like that does sound better, but at the same time, like it's a bit of like the infamous like Family Guy clip with the mystery box. It's like, hey, it's like we got a boat. It's like, but the mystery box could be even anything. It could even be like a younger, cheaper boat. But it's like, no, Luke Kennard's really good, and so it doesn't make sense to just kind of trade him in for the mystery box.
What do you think his ceiling is? Like, how good do you think Luke Kennard could be in the NBA? And as a caveat on that, how do you feel about the nickname Luka Nard, which is what Suns fans are already calling him because we missed out on Luka Doncic?
Oh yeah, that's got to be rough. So there was two things. We got two nicknames for Luke. Cool Hand Luke, obviously,
that's great.
That's great. And then there was for a brief, fleeting moment, he and Derrick Rose were coming off the bench together and just like flamethrowing teams. And so it was Guns N' Roses off the bench.
I don't mind that. I don't mind that. You got the Rose. And do you think that there's any so you have that Tony Snell, the Detroit Pistons have that Tony Snell contract.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you're not a fan of that. Do you think that there's any chance that it could be worked out in a way where Tyler Johnson's expiring this year? There is a scenario where Tyler Johnson can be added to the two guys that were being traded, and the Suns could take back Tony Snell. Do you think there's any chance that we could do that and maybe add a much higher protection, like a top 10 protection on that pick? Is that something that the Pistons would be willing to do, or do you think it doesn't matter if they're going to start rebuilding at some point? They could just have that cap space in there with that Tony Snell contract.
So the problem with that isn't necessarily the protection. Like that's a concern, obviously. But the main thing for that is like Tyler Johnson makes so much money, and the Pistons are so close to the tax that might between Javon Carter and Elliot Kobo make very little money,
right?
But the money they do make like would be eaten up by Tyler Johnson, and so that would send the Pistons into the tax,
right?
Which they like don't want to do, just absolutely don't want to do. So that'd be interesting, but if you would need to find a third team or you need to take something else, you have any interest in Langston Galloway?
At this point, I don't know. Maybe it's just really difficult. We're on 3 losses in a row, right? It is funny, as you know, I'm sure, how fans work. Like DeAndre Ayton will have a good game, and everyone's like, I wouldn't trade him for anyone. I wouldn't trade him for Karl Anthony Towns. He's DeAndre Ayton. He's going to be superstar. The Suns lose 2-3 games in a row, and it's like, I was proposing a DeAndre Ayton, D'Angelo Russell trade on Twitter after that because, things vary so wildly, even with me or any fan, really, if you're looking at how you feel about the team game after every win and every loss. It varies wildly. So at this point, Langston Galloway, he might be an upgrade over some of the players on the Suns, depending on the day. And you're asking me on a 3-game losing streak, so who knows?
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. No, one more thing I did want to ask you though is, what do you think, Luke Kennard will be worth to the Suns, like in extension talks? Because as I talked about, he will be extension eligible this offseason. I do think that's something that's really important for him. Just looking at the Suns cap sheet, they have a lot of room over the cap, but under the tax. And with the Tyler Johnson expiring coming off, that seems pretty big for them. But at the same time, it does seem like you would want to re-sign Aaron Baines, and maybe you want to bring back Dario Saric, and that would eat into that available space. So what kind of deal do you think you'd be comfortable giving Luke Kennard as a Sun?
I personally would not be surprised if Aaron Baines was not in a Suns jersey in 2 days.
Really?
It's just very possible. I think at some point
he was so good for them to start the year,
and he is good. He's a good player. He has. The problem is he's missed a lot of games. He's missed over 20 games. It might even be close to 30 games so far this season. And even missing all of those games, he's almost at his minute total for what he played with the Boston Celtics last year. And he's just not durable enough to sustain that sort of play. And that, of course, is because of DeAndre Ayton being out for 25 games. And if he was in the proper role, it would be a perfect addition for the Suns if he can come back and play behind DeAndre Ayton like he was supposed to. And he would be great. And I do think he's a great leader and he's a great mentor. But the team also has to think about long-term flexibility. And because he's so good, there's a chance that teams that are competing at the highest level will look to add him to try and, just get them over that hump to get a championship. Like, for example, the Clippers, if they were looking for somebody like that to come off the bench, especially if they're looking to trade Montrezl Harrell. Not that Montrezl Harrell would be a fit in Phoenix, but they would still need a backup center. And if you can get something from the Clippers that would be a good long-term asset, it just wouldn't surprise me. I personally really like Aaron Baines, and I would like to keep him just because I think he's a perfect kind of mentor for DeAndre, and I think he's taught him how to screen, which is huge. It's one of Aaron Baines' best skills. But I think there's a chance that he's gone. Dario Saric is an interesting one. He's lost his starting role to a really skinny small forward in Mikal Bridges, and Dario's a weird one. I think there's a reason he's been moved around the league a little bit in his rookie deal, because he's very inconsistent with how he plays. I think he's a better defender than he gets credit for, and maybe a worse offensive player than he gets credit for. So I think there are ways to actually make the cap space make sense, and the Suns have a lot going into 2021 with Kelly Oubre dropping off as well. I think that if you have a starting backcourt of Ricky Rubio and Devin Booker, any team with Ricky Rubio needs another guard who can hit shots. That's like a necessary thing with Ricky Rubio for those times where Ricky Rubio is played out of the game by really smart defensive teams. You can put in somebody to hit shots in his place. And that means that Luke Kennard would be valued, I think, more by the Suns than some other types of teams. So I think they would make the space. I'm not sure. I guess I'm not prepared to talk about how much money that would be until I get a chance to really watch him if he does get traded. But I think that they would value him pretty highly. I think that they would make a play to either try to extend him or definitely try to keep him once they do get into that restricted free agency. And that restricted free agency would come at a nice time for the Suns in that they would have a lot of cap space and they would own his bird rights so they can really go into the above the cap in that 2021 season if they did decide to keep him. So I think he would be valued pretty highly.
Okay. Okay. So what's the plan for the rest of the season for Phoenix?
That's such a good question. I think it's so hard. They're not. Here's what I will say: they're not going to tank. They're just not going to.
So like if I get that unprotected pick, like they're not going to bottom out to give me a better draft pick. Oh.
No, and I guess the fact that the pick is even potentially being traded shows that they're not going to tank. But the main reason they're not going to tank is because this is Devin Booker's 5th year, and he does not want to tank again. It's already essentially been 4 losing years, and out of those 4 losing years, at least 3 of them were losing on purpose. You can maybe say his rookie year they were trying to win, but outside of that, it's basically been losing and losing and losing and losing, and incompetence and incompetence and incompetence and incompetence. James Jones was hired before this season to try and bring some sort of stability. Monty Williams given a 5-year contract to try and steady the ship as much as possible. They're going to keep trying to win. I don't think there's really, they're in a bad position to make the playoffs. I will say that. But any acquisition that could help fix the minutes without Devin Booker on the court, like Luke Kennard, would make a massive difference toward this team actually winning more games. Likely they would not make the playoffs, but ending as the 9th or 10th seed, that would be good for the Suns. That maybe that's not good for every team, but for a team that won 19 wins last year, that's a pretty big improvement.
Okay, no, that makes sense, and that also gives you a good indication of why they would be more likely to forego protections on the pick.
Exactly.
If they don't plan on losing anyway.
Exactly,
it makes less sense to protect the pick.
I will say they are a team that has been hit with some pretty bad injuries throughout the entire time that Devin Booker has been on the team. Devin Booker missed like 30 games last year. He's missed some games in the past. DeAndre Ayton has missed some games. Aaron Baines, even though you wouldn't think that would have a massive effect on wins, it does. The games that Aaron Baines doesn't play, we have a lot less likely chance of winning. So even if they continue to try to win games, if the injuries hit, this team is not deep enough to continue winning games when the injuries hit them hard. So even if they continue to try and win, there's a chance that pick could get higher than what it is right now.
Yeah. To be fair, Ayton didn't miss games because of injury.
Right. Not this year. just stupidity, really.
Right. Yeah. All right, Mike. Well, that's everything I got. You got any more questions for me about Luke Kennard and his potential fit and like what's up with him?
I think I got a pretty good understanding of him. I appreciate you answering the questions I had because I do, it's hard to know every player on every team.
No, absolutely.
And I did feel like I knew him pretty well. It's just how much he could play at the point guard and how much you think he could play at the small forward position. I think that was the main thing that I wanted to know. So I appreciate you answering that.
Yeah, no problem. And for what it's worth, I can see Luke being very successful in Phoenix.
Right.
So much so that I'm a little bit dubious about like how this trade is really, if the trade goes down as currently constructed, the big swing point is how well the Pistons can develop like Elliot Kobo.
Right.
And so that is the thing I'm most like worried about as we move on. Plus, like in the draft, I had my eye on this other French point guard. And so it's like, are we going to end up with a surplus of French dudes now?
Maybe that's the goal in the future. And I will say this, Elliot Kobo might be frustrating at times, but I think he has a lot of potential. Javon Carter, for as frustrating as he can be on offense, I promise you will have fun watching him on defense. Oh, yeah. It is completely insane. He is a bulldog just chomping at the bit at every moment. So you'll have fun with that if it does go down.
Detroit fans will absolutely love Javon Carter if that happens. Any like bulldoggy defense first point guard, like they will glom onto that guy.
They're the best.
I got no worries about that.
They're the best. But, they're fun.
They are fun. All right, Mike, let the people know where they can find you, where they can find the timeline, where they can find anything else you guys are covering for the Suns.
Yeah, you can find the timeline, obviously. The Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast is on all podcast apps. We have a YouTube channel as well. You can subscribe to us, The Timeline, on YouTube. I'm at Protected Pick on Twitter. Feel free to follow me. I promise you it will be less serious than this conversation that we're having right now. I mostly just have fun on Twitter.
Twitter's better for fun. Absolutely.
Yeah, if you take it too seriously, it's taking years off your life.
Exactly. Who needs that? And of course, you can take some years off my life at Laz Chance. That's at LAZCHANCE. You can also listen to my other podcast, the Detroit Bad Boys podcast, and read anything I have to offer about the trade deadline on DetroitBadBoys.com. All right, y'all, this has been Pistons versus Everybody, and we will talk to y'all maybe later this week. I don't know. Trade deadline gets a little crazy. We'll talk to you guys later.
Once again, huge thanks to Lazarus Jackson for joining us here on the timeline. Obviously, you guys have a pretty good idea of why the Suns want to target a guy like Luke Kennard. Maybe you have a better idea of the kind of player he is now. We'll be back later this week. Make sure to follow Lazarus at LazChance.
What we got here is a failure to communicate.
JB Weld, world's strongest bond. Pros have trusted it for over 50 years. But why hire a pro when you can JB Weld it? JB Weld makes it easy to do yourself. We're proud to have JB Weld Adhesives as a sponsor. I personally know the owner. Hung out with these guys down at the car show there. And I have all their products. What can I say? DIY projects, good, auto stuff, crafts, plumbing, marine, all the applications. I use the product to fix Sonny's tennis shoe, save myself some money. Stromer used it to fix his tray on his wet saw because he's doing some tile work. Different product, but all made by JB Weld. JB Weld just acquired Herculiner, the original DIY truck bed liner. So if you're looking for the world's strongest truck bed liner, Herculiner has you covered. It's JB Weld, right, Dawson?
JB Weld is available at jbweld.com. Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, AutoZone, Advance Auto Parts, Napa, O'Reilly, Amazon, Michaels, and more. And remember, JB Weld epoxy products are proudly made in the USA. JB Weld, world's strongest bond.